to The Empire Never Ended with Boris, Fritz, and Ray. We are on part 3 of our new. I don't know. I feel like this guy's kind of our new Ezra Pound in some ways, in the sense that Ray has to deal with him. There's a lot of episodes about him.
It's always my fault.
Yeah, is it?
No one made me do this.
You pick the most, fabulous and complex characters. Is what happens there.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, you had American Nazi Party kind of got to your head. Ezra Pound.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember A&P Ray days. Oh, yeah, I was worried. I mean,
you've really gotten some of the heavy hitters here.
That's true. Yaki too. Yeah. Damn. Maybe are they in? I think. Well, look. Maybe all of our characters are like that, but maybe only you truly get down to their soul. In that deeply disturbing
to something.
Way.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I got to Bob Matthews' soul.
That's true, but you knocked that one out in like 2 episodes, right?
I think that was only 2 episodes.
That's what I'm saying. Like when Ray gets into these things, we end up with like 4 or 5 episodes about fucking Ezra Pound, and then we're all beating our heads against the wall.
I mean, Father Kajević, at least his story is not as dark completely. There's like humor in it.
Yeah.
Not always. I mean, most of the time, not deliberate.
Right. The constant drunkenness definitely helps lubricate the story.
Yeah. I mean, certainly not nearly as evil as Pound.
No.
Surprisingly, I guess we'll learn a lot less racist than most people we talk about on the show.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah. That's a part of this episode today.
I thought something was missing.
Yeah. Well, yeah. We can maybe discuss why is it so. Yeah. So obviously we're talking about Father Stojilko Kajević, part 3.
Somebody I bet our listeners really never thought they would know so much about. No, it's not a name that's out there really, but here we are.
Yeah. Well, we have to talk about him. He's a Serbian Chetnik terrorist, anti-communist one in America during the Cold War era, who was, personally knew Ronald Reagan and so on. So
let's not forget Priest, which I think is also pretty fun.
Yep.
So he is perfect for our podcast, really.
Man, Ronald Reagan really kept the best company, huh?
Yes.
King Leka the First gave him a fucking tiger or whatever, or elephant rather, maybe elephant. Father Kajević,
Did you just confuse Reagan with Otacon?
He made Croatia Day in California to be the Ustasha Independence Day. So he really touches. Reagan really touches kind of every part of this arc in some way or another.
Yeah. Wow. All right.
Fucking freak.
Yes.
Yeah. You will see, like, Father Kajević has things to say about Ronald Reagan.
Okay.
You will be surprised, and then you will be surprised again.
Okay.
Sounds like a roller coaster.
Yeah. So in the first episode about Father Kajević, we talked about, how he ended up in America and his whole early story and how he ended up being a terrorist, which was kind of strange because they just invited him to a meeting and said, we're starting a terrorist group. And he was like, okay. And that's basically how it happened.
That was the meeting in Paris, right?
Yes. Yeah. Andra Lončarić was... Yeah, like a Chetnik who was working for MI6 or 5. I always confuse those two during the Second World War. Probably OSS later. And then, ended up in Tito's prison after the Second World War. Went to Paris and met Father Kajević there, who was, a new immigrant in Paris, and recruited him for his new terrorist group modeled after the Black Hand.
Right. With some direct connections, is that right? That there was some Black Hand guys still around then, huh?
Yeah, like one of the advisors to the group was this guy Gavrilović, who used to be a member of the Black Hand back in the day and was a government minister after that and so on.
Mm-hmm. And then took a bunch of axe swings to the face in his later career.
That would be Lončarić, yes. He got his head literally split in two by an axe. done by the Yugoslav intelligence, or UDBA,
Yeah.
which they had this style of these gruesome murders in those days. I guess they were trying to make some point. I don't know.
But yeah, point was made, I think.
Yes, I mean, these people were actually terrified, and
I mean, splitting someone's head open like a fucking melon usually does that.
yeah. They also killed children, which is like horrible. But yeah, they were like really doing like the Paris police was like, this is like some maniac. We have a serial killer or something like this, and then they figured out, oh, it's UDBA. Okay. Because like the head was split in two, and there was like blood on the walls, and it was like, well, and then but before his head got split in two, he sent Father Kajević to America with a special mission to recruit people there and to start their group there, which he did, and they renamed it SOPO, or the Serbian Liberation Movement, Fatherland is the name in Serbo-Croatian. In English, for some reason, they called it Freedom for the Serbian Fatherland. And Father Kajević basically was, in the early days of SOPO, was the leader of it and the main recruiter of all of the other groups. And in the first episode, we kind of discussed some of their actions, how they bombed Yugoslav consulates and embassies in the US and Canada, also attacked, houses of some of the Yugoslav officials and diplomats. And Father Kajević even traveled to Europe to do such things. It was all kind of pretty, although he's very proud of those actions, some are very amateur-like, kind of like just dropping a canister of gasoline into a window and things like this. And we discussed how they were mostly drunk while doing these things.
Right.
Yes.
They also had this fixation of killing Tito and attempted to do something like that a few times when Tito visited the US, and some of these attempts were quite comical. We discussed most of them. And then in the second episode dedicated to Father Kajević, we talked about how he was arrested by the FBI and his trial and the early days of his imprisonment while the trial was still going on, which was in Chicago's Metropolitan Correctional Center, I think, prison. And, in this episode, we also talked about how Father Kajević had connections with the conservative movement in the US and the Republican Party. He also, in that part of the story, wanted to convince us that he had many lady friends who were kind of really into him.
Yeah, like Republican superstar lady friends.
Yes, some of them. Yeah. Usually connected to CIA in some capacity. One of which was this woman called Kathleen Thatcher. It was a fake name, but a person connected to, the American Conservative Union and CPAC and such things. And
like a founding member of CPAC, was that right?
Yeah.
Is that what he claimed?
Mm-hmm. Yes. And like a friend of Ronald Reagan who, would meet Reagan and discuss Father Kajević with him, according to Father Kajević.
I was going through, I was really looking through old CPAC events and like lineups and speakers and stuff like that to try to find I figured like it'd be a short list of women that were presenting in the late 70s and 80s at these things. Yeah. And it's so short I didn't find any. So Kathleen still remains a mystery. Yeah. Okay. There are a few Kathleens around though in Reagan's circle. That was not an uncommon name apparently for conservative women in the Reagan administration, but who knows?
So, in the end, I think Father Kajević got 12 years of prison for the terrorism he did. Yeah, we also briefly discussed how his kind of weird friend, fellow terrorist, Nikola Kavaja, kind of Luca Brasi kind of character that we'll discuss more in the future, tried to get him out of prison, although they were both out on bail at the time, I think, or like Father Kajević maybe wasn't, at the time, by hijacking a plane. And then there's also a very unsuccessful action because Father Kajević was like, you shouldn't do that.
Yes.
Release the hostages, please. Get me back to prison.
Right.
Which, Kavaja didn't like. and was
Sober up
eventually
Kajević.
arrested in Ireland. Yeah. So yeah, as I said, Father Kajević got 12 years of prison. This is now the era that we'll discuss now. He was sent to a maximum security prison. He was convicted as a terrorist. He served he spent 8 out of those 12 years in prison. So he did get an early release. That's what we'll talk about today. So this one is based on this book written by him called Demigods and Criminals, I think, which is like a novel, autobiographical novel published in English in Britain. And as we talked about last time, the form of novel is that he's remembering his past through a conversation with his former FBI agent who's very interested in his story and who's visiting him at his home where they drink and talk. So this former FBI agent is called Thomas O'Neill. And at about this point where we are now picking up the story, Thomas O'Neill starts bringing his wife there, or his fiancée, actually. Her name is Mary McDermott. And so they come to Father Kajević's place. At the time, Father Kajević is like a college professor. He's a professor of philosophy or ethics, really.
Yeah, there's a twist for you there.
Yes. And so he serves them coffee and cookies and cognac, of course. And Mary McDermott, as I said, occasionally she goes to the toilet to vomit.
Yes, right.
Father Kajević thinks it's because of his story is being so brutal and so on.
Yeah, they didn't put that in my dinner with Andre.
Yeah.
We sawed his fucking legs off.
Yeah. Mm.
I held him down. Kajević got out the hacksaw.
Okay. So they're transferring Father Kajević. He will be in the end transferred to the Leavenworth prison. Or one of the famous kind of prisons that he says is the new Alcatraz. Although Kajević was in another prison, which he also called the new Alcatraz. So I guess that's their thing.
I mean, I guess that's a frame of reference for them.
Yeah.
Yeah. But also, it also says something about how the U.S. prison system evolved around this time too.
Yes.
A lot of new Alcatrazes around.
Yeah. So these are now this is late 70s, beginning of the 80s now. I mean, I think it's 79 or something like this. And but before he was transferred to Leavenworth, he spent some time in a federal penitentiary at Terre Haute. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah. In Indiana.
Yes. So that was like a transfer station for him for some time.
Mm-hmm.
And when he was transferred there, he describes this. It's interesting how they round them up. They don't really tell you what's going on, but you kind of conclude. They round them up and they put them in a cement room, which is called a tube. And they keep them there for hours. It's very cold, and they're just in a cement room, standing there for hours without any information. But they assume they will be transferred to a much worse prison. And then they kind of divide them in categories based on their crimes, I guess. And this is reflected in how they are transferred. So the first category, they only get the handcuffs. And then the second one, they get the handcuffs, but also the shackles on their legs. And then the third category gets the handcuffs and the shackles, but then also a heavy chain that goes around their waist, which locks into their shackles and onto their wrists, to the side of their body, so they can't really use their hands.
Right.
And then the fourth category is where Kajević was only with one other guy, which had all of that, which he said was about 30 pounds of iron. But then there was an additional thing, which was this black iron box that would snap, he says, like a cobra or something like this. So they would put that on this chain that locked his wrist to the rest of his body. Oh. And that the point of that was that if he tried moving his fingers or wrist, it would hurt. So he even had that. And then they put them in buses and drive them to Indiana, I guess. Terre Haute is there, right?
Yeah.
And so they ride them, they drive them all night or something like this. And, at some point they give them like sandwiches, but he's not able to use his hands, so he can't eat. And so he just like tries to bend and like eat or something, but it doesn't work. So, that's how it goes. And they finally arrive there, and like then they stand again, and it's everyone is in a very bad mood, and like he was, you kind of meet some friends on the way that you won't see probably again, and he was standing there with like a black man who like for him Terre Haute wasn't like a transit station, and it was where he will serve the rest of his sentence, and when they are like about to be, he's about to be taken away and probably never see Kajević again. He says something like, well, this will be my home for the next 25 years or something like this. And then they say good luck to each other. But, everyone is like very kind of anxious and depressed, and it's, and so they're like split up and, dumped into separate cages, literally. And they go through, all kind of humiliating, procedures, and getting naked, inspected, so on, moved into different rooms, and so on. And then he was like put in a cell by himself. It was a very dirty, dark cell that had like an iron bed there, and just like a dirty gray blanket. And immediately when he went into this cell, he just dropped the blanket on the concrete floor and started like running just on the same spot for like a long time until he was completely exhausted and he was able like to pass out, basically, which is what he wanted. So he was spending the I think months in this like place, and without any idea when he will be transferred or what's going on and so on, mostly in solitary confinement. And at some point they finally would like let him out, and like the guard even offered him a shower, which was the first time they offered him something like this. And then he realized it's Christmas, so this is why they're offering him a shower. So he got 5 minutes to have a shower, and then he got some like a clean jumpsuit, and he was surprised when they brought him back to the cell that they left the door open so he can go out and like talk to other prisoners and so on. And at that point, like he was approached by almost immediately by a guy who kind of tried to persuade him to try to escape because he will get killed in Leavenworth, and like he wouldn't like last a month there, things like this. And Father Kajević thinks that these people, because he often had situations like that, and he thinks that these are people who are like sent there by the government to try to persuade him like to escape, either to get him like more prison time or to get him killed or something like this. Of course, Father Kajević has this theory how he was put there by the State Department because they didn't want him to get in power in Yugoslavia after Tito died.
Right.
Yeah. Yes, I keep forgetting that he's also nuts.
Yes. Yeah, there was interesting people there. We'll meet some of them for sure. So, at some point he's just, one morning a guard comes there and says, okay, Mr. Stone, in this book he's Mr. Stone.
Right.
Pack your things, you're being moved. And then he's off to Leavenworth. And they also tell him like that he stayed such a long time in Terre Haute because apparently they didn't want to move him because everyone was scared of moving a terrorist and were like afraid of him escaping and such things. So this is like his stay there was like prolonged before getting to Leavenworth. And like when he gets to Leavenworth, he also describes this in a very bleak kind of almost in some way apocalyptical way. He says like, in front of us stood monumentally tall prison walls, massively wide and more impressive than the walls around the great medieval cities. We couldn't fail to notice the symbol of power and terror, the gun towers, more than a dozen of them dotted around the prison compound. And then, after sometimes he writes, then I was swallowed up inside beyond the gate, merging with the living dead. My heart was pounding as it filled with this despair. Some of us would never walk out through the same gate alive, free. Many of us would grow bent, sick. Some would die inside and would be carried out on the iron cages, from the iron cages on stretchers. and placed in a grave behind the compound wall, absolved from past and future sins, the dead. And so the guard will perform the funeral ceremony, concluding with a brief eulogy. Fuck the shit, hallelujah. So this fuck the shit, hallelujah is a kind of a nihilist motto of the prisoners there and the guards, I guess. So there are 4 jailhouses inside of Leavenworth, and they are all under a massive dome, like a huge massive dome. And inside of every jailhouse, there is a massive steel box, sort of a box inside of a box. And it is like gas pipes are installed, according to Father Kajević, around these steel boxes. And they would be used in case of a riot to pump in nerve gas.
Okay.
So, again, many humiliating procedures. They're, stripped down, inspected, moved from one room to another without explanation and so on. And finally, he's confronted with some kind of a administrator there who's called Dr. White, who's very arrogant and who's like, so you're that fucking terrorist or something like this. You're just an ordinary prisoner here or something like this. And he also, tells him like, don't look me, don't give me that look, you asshole, something like this. So they finally put him in a cell, and there's like 2 other guys there, and who kind of ignore him, and he ignores them. He just wants to go to sleep, so he lays down. The cell is like pretty disgusting. There's like traces of blood everywhere, and he is in his bed and looking at the wall, and the wall has an inscription on it, and it says, Mom, I have been here for over a year. They dumped me in here with my broken ribs. Beatings are regular. My brain is a mess. My brain is messed up, Mom. I am dying. Today is my 26th birthday. Mom, love your son, Jay. So he sees that before he tries, to go to sleep. And he also overhears, his 2 cellmates who are like saying something like, who's this asshole, he's 100% like a snitch, and like, we'll get rid of him, like we'll, kill him, we'll use a pillow and such things.
Damn.
So this is like his first night there.
Wow.
This is like Kajević's version of the Madball song Behind These Walls or something. Like
yes. So he was placed in a special part of the Leavenworth prison at that point, which is like, used for like segregating prisoners who are like, seen as creating trouble or something like this. And this part of prison is called Segregation 63. So he was only temporary there, and he would be moved there throughout the years whenever, they saw him as creating problems or something like this. Or he was accused by someone of creating problems, as anyone else there. So like Segregation 63 is like a special jailhouse, and he says one of the oldest and most frightening in the whole of the US. And prisoners there told him that it was built during the Civil War, and the purpose of it was to house death row prisoners before they were hanged. And it only had like around 20 cells. So the 2 cellmates he had there didn't talk to him at all at first. Like they were both convicted killers. One was a cop killer, one was from Hawaii, the other was from New Mexico. And then, at some point there a male nurse goes around and yells out, shouts like aspirin, Valium, Thorazine, and so on. So you are able to get any medication you want from those that they have. And, Kajević asked for aspirin, which is the first time he said anything. And then those 2 cellmates noticed that, he has an accent. So, I guess they relaxed more and figured out, okay, this guy is probably not a Fed. He doesn't really speak as an American. So they kind of started talking to him. And but then they stopped again when they heard that he was a terrorist. So they then needed some more time to talk to him again. So eventually they gave up on this idea of murdering him.
Well, that's nice.
Yeah. And then you could, the guards will give you a form if you wanted to have some recreation, and you had to fill up the form, and then tomorrow you would go to recreation. And these 2 guys told Father Kajević, don't bother with that, that's stupid. But he wanted to do that. And then they take you to a cage, literally a cage, which is 20 feet by 10. So there's like every prisoner who wants to go to recreation has his own cage. And when you're placed there for 25 minutes and you have to run or walk fast the whole time. If you stop, you're like, recreation time is over, and you also you lose your privilege to go to recreation. You have to move the whole time. He also has a kind of an interesting, observation. He says, okay, this medication is, available, and many prisoners get hooked on all kinds of stuff there, and which, Father Kajević says, like, that's what, the prison system wants. They want a more docile population, and also population that's, addicted, and then, will be more obedient. And,
I mean, if they were giving out Thorazine, that's that's no joke.
And then he says, like, and if you decide to stop using medication, after you get addicted, you will end up in the federal mental asylum known as the Happy House, where the government will use you as a guinea pig for medical research. Okay, this is like his, I guess this is some kind of a thing that is said amongst the prisoners there, and he picked it up there, and which is, interesting. He doesn't really talk. He mentions this idea twice and doesn't really go into it, but otherwise doesn't mention things like that. This is like pretty much in the kind of MK Ultra, territory.
Right.
But he doesn't get too much into it.
Although I'm sure if he did go to a facility like that, he would have his like Nurse Ratched character be super into him.
Oh, sure.
Yes.
Nurse Kathleen.
So, after 8 weeks of this segregation, 63, what did I say? Yeah, 63. He's like, just one morning, a guard again shows up and says, pack your things, we're moving you. So they move him to like a Unit A, one of those 4 jailhouses with general prison population. And so there, the situation is much better, like, especially after, segregation 63. So, he gets clean sheets, blankets, towels, even 2 pair of uniforms that are clean, and, shaving and dental items and such things. He's put in a cell. At the time where he's put there, there's no one there, but there are like 6 beds. And eventually, I think during that same day, 5 men come there who are like 5 black men. And at first, he's the only white guy in the cell, and they don't talk to him. But there's like an older, among these 5 men, there's like an older guy who's kind of the leader of the group, like, from Kajević's perspective. Like an older man, and after some hours or days, this older man starts talking to Father Kajević and says, addresses him in a very friendly way, saying, "Hi, brother, my name is Calvin Mill," and then he introduces everyone else in the cell. And from that point on, Father Kajević starts becoming more and more close to these people. And he especially likes this Calvin Mill guy, who is like an interesting character to him. In the prison, Calvin was like a chaplain clerk, which there's some also interesting things to be said about that. But outside, he was a full-time psychiatrist using an alias Mackenzie. But he was doing this based on a fake PhD from Harvard. But he was also a part-time bank robber, which is why he was in prison.
Nice.
He had his banking business, as they call it, outside the prison, and this was his 4th time in prison for robbing banks. And each time he got like 20 years, and this time as well. But he would get out after a couple of years each time, and he was convinced that this time it will be the same. And I was very optimistic about it. And Calvin would come he would become a kind of a mentor to Father Kajević to prison life, and would give him some good advice how to behave, what to do, what not to do, and so on. And also, he kind of really liked his new cellmates, and he makes a lot of, a point how glad he was that he had this experience of living with, 5 black men there for almost 2 years. He had other cellmates, but he spent most of his time with this group of people. And he says things like, I was misinformed about crime and punishment. My mind, like yours, was poisoned with all kinds of prejudices about lawbreakers and the prisoners, especially the blacks, American Indians, and Chicanos. 5 black men were my cellmates, a family if you want. Sharing the same cage for almost 2 years has cleared my mind of any confusion about them. I believe that the color of human skin does not tell us anything about the concept of human character. Living with these men, I was assured once and for all that human nature basically is the same. People are people, and black people are as good as any other people. He was in some danger. So his idea was that like Dr. White or Mr. White that I mentioned, the asshole who was one of the administrators. There's Kajević's idea that Dr. White was a racist who thought that black people are like bad, and that putting Kajević with them in a cell would be a bad thing for him, that he would be in danger, and that this is why they did that. But he said he was like a stupid racist. He didn't realize actually that this would be a very good thing for me, because he says he saw the humanity of these people, and he says the truth of their humanity has set me free from my prejudices. He's also kind of interestingly aware that Father Kajević says that he didn't have a racist outlook before, in terms of he wasn't an ideological racist. He says I was a Christian, so I kind of accepted that God created all men equal, but I still had my racist prejudices. Like my feelings were not connected to my thoughts about the race issue, but actually living with these people kind of made my feelings completely in tune with what I accepted as to be true. So it kind of delivered him from racism.
And I think he probably, even though he lived in the U.S. for a long time at this point, or for quite some time, he was living in pretty segregated communities. So,
sure, yeah.
In which, were pretty racist as well. Very racist.
Yeah. He says there was danger because of this, but only it came from white racists who didn't like white people who were kind of hanging out with black people, and so that was the danger that he was exposed to because of this situation. So it's pretty interesting. I don't know. I don't want to say too good things about Father Kajević, but it's because we cover the worst of the worst, so you cannot not compare him to other characters that we covered.
Yeah.
So he, the comparison is quite favorable to him, I would say.
By Tenepod standards, he's practically okay.
Yeah, by Tenepod standards, this is like the best redemption arc you can have.
Yeah, for real.
Yeah. I mean, he kind of, he remained basically some kind of right-wing Chetnik guy, I guess. But, this is also kind of funny, it's I don't know what to think of all of this, because we covered so many of these American horrible fascists, and then you have this Serbian Chetnik guy, and he goes to prison, and he's like, oh yeah, racism is bad. Black people are just people. And it seems somehow very simple. I don't know.
Yeah, we don't.
It also seems like he has a little critique of prison in there too. I mean, just the kind of dehumanization of the
definitely,
experience.
Yeah. Oh no, he hates prison. He describes it, as an American gulag, and he thinks the way they treat people is an abomination, and it's horrible. Yeah. And he has nothing good to say about it. Even I think I described in some of the previous episode that he doesn't like cops, but he has this kind of although he thinks that government is oppressive, any kind. He also kind of thinks that cops are necessary to exist. He does say things like this, although most of them are bad and such things. But he's never able to say anything good about prison. He never says, "Well, this is necessary," or or we need better prisons or something like this. I think maybe even if he thinks that, he's not able to write that. He only says the most horrible things about them and how this is not a way how you should treat people, basically.
Well, this should certainly complicate his relationship to the Reagan circle, I would guess.
Well, yes, I will get back to that. He does comment on that very directly.
Mm-hmm.
So he was also surprised that like the food like in a federal penitentiary is pretty good. Like so there's choices. You can like choose what kind of an omelet you want. You can have as much as milk as you want. You can like choose between Canadian or American bacon and so on. He was very shocked by this. And he says like if you're hungry on the outside, like just like commit a federal crime and go to a federal penitentiary and you will be fed.
That sounds more like Reagan. That's, yeah.
Yes. Well, I guess that was like, he was expecting something horrible in every aspect of that, life there. So I guess something like this was like shocking to him in some positive sense, I guess. He was also surprised that like when they were like eating and getting their food, that how like civil the prisoners were to each other. Everyone was like respecting boundaries and kind of not standing too close to anyone else. But then he realized this is, out of fear because any kind of mistake can get you killed. And then he realized, especially through, his conversations with his new buddy Calvin, that like you need to like, if you want to like live more than a month in such a prison, you need to control your emotions, anger, and especially your mouth. Like you should like be very careful about what you're saying. When he, got his food, you wanted to say something, Fritz?
Yeah, I'm just starting to wonder now if this is what happens to Kajević when he goes to prison, or if this is what happens to Kajević when he can't drink anymore. He's having like sober thoughts.
Yeah. Well, I mean, okay, this is like his analysis after the fact, but he's kind of telling us, how this process went, how he came to that point, I guess. I don't know. I think he's a pretty functional alcoholic, I would say.
I guess so. He did pull off some pretty wild shit.
Yes.
Or not, but yeah.
I mean, yeah, he was a terrorist, like more or less successful one, and also a priest, also like he did his PhD in philosophy.
Yeah.
All
well hammered. Yeah.
Yes.
That's true. I mean, okay.
So that's pretty functional in my book.
Yeah.
Let me see. Yeah. So, during his first meal, he got his food and then he was like, turned around and started looking for a table. And he was like looking for, his new cellmates to sit with them. But then he didn't realize, that a white man can't sit with black people and eat in a prison together. And there were like some like older, like senior white prisoners there who kind of took pity on him. And they told him like, hey, buddy, come here, sit with us, And they kind of told him like, you're supposed to sit with us when you eat and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like some older dudes who like, he said like looked like some like distinguished, like, retired people or something like this. And then they started conversing amongst themselves. And like, one of these old dudes was saying how, he got, I don't know, 50 years of prison or something like this because, he like was robbing some house and he killed some like a couple who in front of their like 6-year-old kid.
Damn.
And the kid testified against him in the court, and that's what got him the sentence, and he's like, oh fucking, I should have killed that little bastard, like next time, there will be no mercy for kids or so. And and Father Kajević is like completely shocked that these people are saying these things. And he also like, it's interesting like that usually when he describes such things, it's usually like the crimes of white people in prison that shock him. Like all, he describes some serial killers who are killing women and so on. Everything that he's shocked by, like usually the way he describes it, like this kind of, for some reason he chose to talk about white people. And and most of the time when he mentions black and like American Indian prisoners and so on, even the ones who want to kill him, he doesn't really talk about them in such a way. Like as like being shocked by their crimes or lack of humanity and so on. So he also gives an example of why you should behave the way I described, like keep your distance and be civil and don't talk too much and so on. Because like the first week he was there, like there was like a very young guy who was new in the prison, and he like didn't respect the line when he was getting his food and went straight for it. And then like an older dude came to him and said like, listen, you should go back to the line. And the young dude was just like, fuck you, and that's it. And the old guy was like just sighed and like went back to his line, like, okay. And then a bit later, like when that young dude was like in front of the phone booth, he behaved in the same way, didn't wait in the line and so on. And there was like an older prisoner there who was like a lifer. People call him Pop, and Pop was just like looking at him angrily and just went away and came back with a very long screwdriver and like just stabbed him in the neck and threw his neck into the heart and just killed him on the spot.
Damn.
And like and that's like what Father Kajević saw himself on the first week he was there. And like no one was particularly shocked by that. The guards came very slowly and kind of pick up the body without any hurry. And he says that like that was a very usual thing. Like such executions, he called them, were frequent, quiet, and swift. And he saw like dozens and dozens of them.
Wow.
And usually the victims were newcomers and usually young, and behaved in such a way like that. They overstepped some boundaries and took freedoms that other prisoners didn't like. Usually,
steep learning curve.
Yes, and when he went back to the prison cell, Calvin asked him like, "Did you see that thing over there?" And Father Kajević said yes, and Calvin told him, "No, you didn't see anything, and you should like always like pretend that you don't see and you don't hear anything here."
Kajević getting the basic lessons on not snitching.
Yeah.
Yes, and by the way, Calvin was or CM as he calls him. CM was. He says, like, extremely intelligent and very likable, and he was also involved in the civil rights movement. So he showed him like photos of him together with Martin Luther King Jr. and Jesse Jackson and Diana Ross.
Wow.
So, but CM was worried about Kajević's safety, not only because he was hanging out, and living with black people, but because he had his connection. CM was very connected. It's not really clear what his position is here. He's a chaplain like clerk, and I'll tell you more about that institution from CM's mouth. But he had information, and he told Father Kajević that some prisoners were transferred from Atlanta for a prison where Nikola Kavaja was held. The guy who from Kajević's group who hijacked the plane to set him free, and Kajević told him like, don't do that.
Yes.
And so on.
Yes.
So Kavaja was very pissed at Father Kajević, and he was saying in this prison how Kavaja is a Fed. And now some prisoners who heard that came, to this prison and are saying these things. And that's basically a death sentence, So he told him like, be careful, this is like fucked. But it's interesting, what CM told Father Kajević about the whole institution of a prison chaplain. He told him that this is like one of the most dangerous persons you can have in a prison, much worse than a guard or anything. And that they're basically kind of the chaplain's office is where the FBI, CIA, and national security agents have their kind of headquarters in a prison, and use that institution to instruct snitches, give them orders, and like collect the intel on prisoners. And they are like very connected and basically used for that purpose and for other things as well. And he's kind of not sure what CM's role in all of this is. Like, is he on their side or what is he doing? Because it seemed that he had some privileges, and eventually he was right. And I mean, he was let go out of prison after only 4 years or something like that.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. So at some point, Father Kajević wanted to get a job at the chaplain's office. He's a priest, after all.
Yeah,
and,
quite logical.
Makes sense.
And he had a recommendation from, his friend CM. But when he went there, the chaplain was kind of not ready for him being there, and was kind of surprised that he's there, and was almost like Father Kajević in some kind of a panic situation. and wanted him to get out as soon as possible. Basically kind of kicked him out, but in a very kind of panicked way. And Kajević was thinking that he would see something that he was not supposed to see there, which ties in with this idea of it being some kind of an op.
Yeah, or maybe he had just farted.
Well, I mean, yeah, but he didn't get that job. Yeah.
He thought the Orthodox were pagans or something.
Yeah.
It's frustrating that this is in a novel form and not something more documentary-like, because the liberties that he can take in that form make this very frustrating, because it all sounds very plausible, very realistic. But I just have to keep reminding myself that this guy also thought he was next in line to Tito.
Yeah, sure. Well, but okay, this is like that's his ego and being kind of crazy, but he actually was in this prison. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
that's so at least he's he's not telling us that he knows that this is absolutely true. He's telling him what his friend told him who works there. Yeah. And what his impressions were and so on.
Yeah.
So there's like an interesting chapter where he talks about his views on the war against drugs, the war on drugs. But it's interesting that he kind of starts it in a seemingly unrelated way, this topic, because he talks about how when he was out, he used to hang out in a restaurant owned by his friend, who was like an old Chetnik, I think. Here he calls him Voja Panthers, but it's Voja Pantelić, the actual person's name.
Okay.
Who was like one of the financiers of SOPO. He owned the restaurant in DC together with his like French wife. And he tells us that this place was a place where CIA people were hanging out, like even some high up people. And he mentions how this is like where he really became friends with George Mussolini, the guy that we have a whole episode on, who was he says the chief of their like Balkans desk, so on. But he also mentions other like CIA people there, like Bruce Baumgartner, who was Francis Powers' partner with the U-2 spy mission over the USSR, for example.
Okay. Oh, wow.
So he became like a close friend of Father Kajević, hanging out in this restaurant. So he kind of talks about that, and then starts talking about the drug, like the war on drugs. I don't know if he's like, maybe he's trying to tell us something here, but he doesn't really make any direct connection between these two things. It's kind of
so
weird.
He doesn't say like, I know that the CIA made crack or something. And
he doesn't say it in that way, but the chapter starts with this kind of him remembering the CIA hangout where he used to hang with his friends, and then he talks about this without making a direct connection between the two. It's
interesting.
Yeah. So he's very clear. He thinks that the war against drugs is like a scam and it's a joke. He thinks that like the strip searches in the prisons are like only for show and for discipline and for humiliating the prisoners and their visitors. Like he would like have like some church officials like visit him, and then they would never visit him again because they were like humiliated by having to take the completely to get naked and like searched and so on. Like he was once visited by like a bishop, and that's how they treated him, and the guy never came back. Which is like, if he was a real Christian, I think he should, but of course he's a bishop. He doesn't like to be humiliated in such a way, and he was like completely shocked. He didn't even like stay the whole time they had there for the visit. He basically ran away from the prison. But that like Kajević is making the point like that this is like useless. It's only used like to make the life of prisoners like worse, and for discipline, the drugs they have like a separate channel how they come into the prison, and it's not by the prisoners. It's basically the administration of the prison, in his opinion. And he says it's a big business, and it's like the people who make money from it are the people who are waging the so-called war on drugs. Basically, that's his opinion. They are the ones who are running this business. And the drug business inside of prisons, in his opinion, wouldn't function for a day without the knowledge and green light from like government high officials, in his opinion. And he says, basically you can get whatever you want in a prison. For example, his friend CM, like he offered get him like a bottle of French cognac because he, of course, Father Kajević likes cognac. And like, Father Kajević like shocked how you can get that. And CM was like, you can get anything, like, but you need to pay like, 4 or 5 times the price that you would pay for it outside. But Father Kajević kind of refused that because he didn't want to. He had to go through some guard who he hated because that guy was an asshole, so he didn't want to give him money. He did get a job as in the education department, both like as an orderly and as a clerk. And a part of his job was that he was cleaning a floor of like some very long tunnel in the prison. And what's interesting that tunnel was before the people who cleaned it were the Croatian hijackers.
Hey,
yeah, that was just before he was put in Leavenworth. So yeah, but I guess we'll talk about them soon.
Story yet to come.
Yes.
Yeah.
Eventually, he heard that the black Muslims sentenced him to death because they heard the Kavaya story that he's a Fed. Somehow, what Kavaya started reached black Muslims, and now they wanted to kill him. He also, of course, there are some women here who like him very much.
Even in prison, huh?
Yeah.
Yes. They're nuns, of course. They were like teachers. They were doing some courses there, and so Sister Celine in particular liked Father Kajević. She was in her 30s, and she, he tells us that she was beautiful. She also she didn't dress like a nun. This is important, I guess, for him to tell us. She wore civilian clothes or something like this. And she wanted to correspond with him, so they started a correspondence. And then she would even, sell him she would even, send him poems, which was like very surprising to him, and so on. And there's like a weird conversation here, like a prisoner called Tall Jim kind of invites like him to a corner and says, I heard like Sister Celine sent you a poem. You shouldn't think too much of it. She also sends me poems. She sent like a bunch of guys here poems. But then, like by the end of the conversations, Tall Jim tells to Father Kajević, actually, I think like she's really like attracted to you or something like this. Like, Father Kajević really wants to tell us this, although it doesn't make sense, like because Tall Jim was kind of saying the opposite at the beginning of the conversation.
Yeah,
it's a horny ass priest in prison just writing shit.
I mean,
yeah.
And maybe she sent him like the sexy psalms, the ones about like plucking fruit from a tree and all that.
Yeah,
that's how you know if a nun likes you.
Yeah, but Kajević is replying to Tall Jim like, no, she attracted to me, no way. Like we have a platonic relationship. What are you talking about? But he wanted that to be there. But then there was like this like. Guy who was called Mad Jack, who again there was a story like this in the previous episode. It's almost exactly the same because Mad Jack was like into Sister Celine, and he was like apparently masturbating during one of her classes. So he was sent to segregation 63, and then he figured out that Father Kajević like that Sister Celine is into Father Kajević, so he decided he wants to murder Father Kajević. But someone else murdered. No, he murdered someone else. Like he knifed someone else, and then after that, someone killed Mad Jack using like I think they hit him in the head during exercise with a pipe or something. Like
Damn! If there was ever someone who earned their nickname, it's definitely Mad Jack.
But yeah, there's lots of things like that. I'm not mentioning all of these like murders that he witnessed and he knows about, but there's lots of stuff like that. Like everyone's getting killed all the time. But at some point, Celine was gone. He didn't know where she was. But his friend CM one day told him, like, listen, because he's connected there, works for the chaplain. He told him, like, listen, like, Celine sends you, like, more than one letter per week, but the guards are not giving you them. Like, they're, like, keeping those letters. And then he figured out there's, like, an especially evil guard called Lieutenant Lutz, who kind of hated Father Kajević, and he had this idea, or was spreading the rumor that Celine was helping him escape from prison. And, he got worried when he heard that. And, soon enough, one morning he was picked up without any explanation from his cell and dumped again to segregation 63. And when they dumped him there, they told him like try and escape now, something like this. So he figured out it's because of this thing with this Lieutenant Lutz and what he's saying about Sister Celine. So after that, there was some kind of an internal disciplinary hearing or something like this, and where this Lutz guy kind of said that Celine is sending these coded messages to him. I guess he meant the poetry that she's sending to him, and this is some kind of conspiracy for him to escape prison or something like this. But somehow the board were like, this is like rubbish. That has nothing. You're just this is, you don't have any proof.
Yeah.
So they didn't believe this guard, and they let Father Kajević rejoin the general population after that. CM was like, as I said, right. He was let out of prison after a few years only. He didn't serve 20 years. And, soon after that, Kajević got a card from CM who wrote him from the outside. And he wrote him, "Brother, pray for me, soon I will make another pilgrimage."
Oh.
Which, he meant he will, I guess, rob another bank. So, now, Kajević tells us like his opinions about the Reagan administration, the war on drugs more directly.
Okay.
He says that, the Carter administration was fairer, like it was better for prisoners than Reagan's was. Just because, this so-called, war on drugs really was a war on poor people, is how Kajević tells it.
Mm-hmm.
And, the conservatives basically criminalized being poor through this war on drugs. And, that this meant that the prison population exploded. And it was overcrowded, and this also led to all of these murders that he was seeing all the time, which was not as bad before that.
Jesus Christ! Even the Chetnik terrorist gets this.
Right? Yes, I was just thinking that.
The fuck?
Yes. I mean, I'm only saying this like it's a very kind of pretty concise analysis of what the war on drugs is, but it's interesting because coming from the Chetnik terrorist. Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Right.
And he explains it like a very kind of understandable, simple way. And he says, with Christian hypocrites on the march, legal barbarism was in full swing. He does. This is very interesting. He does something which is completely in tune with the Titoism, like the Titoist tradition, although he's an anti-Titoist. And that's that he thinks that Reagan was a good man. And he uses this, the phrase, like often, in Yugoslavia, and I hear in other, like even like China today, for example, there is this idea, that there is corruption in the system, but, the main guy doesn't know about this.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like the bad people around him.
Yeah.
So he says something about Reagan is like, the good man had no idea what was going on inside U.S. penitentiaries, which like maybe it's true, but because he didn't care,
he didn't give a shit.
Yeah. But I guess it meant to him, that he heard from his Kathleen that Reagan said we must pray for Father Kajević. So that I guess this means something to him. Yeah. So yeah. So he had like got a new pair of cellmates, which were kind of interesting. It was like a Bulgarian guy called Ljubo Ivanov. I don't go into him, but he's like a guy also kind of a spy, rumored to work for KGB, CIA, and so on. But I won't get into that. But I will talk about his other cellmate, which is a guy called Leon Walsh. So there was a number of people here who he said were like CIA in different prisons that he was. So Leon Walsh is one of them. So Leon was like during the 60s in Vietnam, he was a student at some university, and he was like a right winger, an anti-communist. But then he was approached by CIA, and they offered him a full scholarship if he starts working for them, which he, as a patriot, of course, accepted. But the job was that he should pretend that he's a leftist and infiltrate anti-war groups, which he did. and then like even became one of the leaders of like a student anti-war group, supposedly. And after he graduated, he got a job in McDonnell Douglas aircrafts, like, which is like sounds like a job that CIA would get you after doing
Yes, it
something
does.
for them. And but again, he was visited by two CIA agents, one that he knew from his university days. This was still during the Vietnam era, and they had a new job for him, and he was supposed to like deliver a package and put it in a certain place in one airport, which he did. And then later that day, he was shocked when he saw in the news that that was a bomb that exploded there, and that it was supposedly done by like a leftist group that was against the war in Vietnam. So you have like kind of a strategy of tension here, basically explained. CIA using a guy to bomb an airport, pretend that it's from a leftist group, and so on. So Leon was, after that, he was arrested by the FBI, brought to the court, where he pleaded that he's not guilty, and to his shock, he was immediately released without bail. Picked up by CIA again. They brought him to like a safe house, which was guarded by military, like was like high security safe house, quite luxurious. It was in West Virginia. And like a Mr. Hogan from CIA there met him and told him that he will go in through a 12-week intensive training, which he did. And after that, after the training was completed, he was dropped to Hamilton, Canada, and with final instructions, and told that he's now on his own. So he kind of had some instructions to read, and he was supposed to go to Montreal, which he did, and to frequent a cafe there called Pago Cafe, which was like a leftist hangout place, which he did, and befriend people there, and reassume his role as a leftist there. Eventually, he was approached by like a Cuban man. I mean, this is all like what he told to Father Kajević in prison, of course.
Yeah, right.
Some Raul, approached him. They became friends, and Raul invited him to the Cuban Cultural Center in Montreal. And eventually, this led him to Cuba, which he visited through Spain. He went to Spain, and then from Spain to Cuba. He settled there. At first, they were suspicious of him, who's this, American dude there. But then he got a good job. He was like an inspector. Like he had an inspector position in Cuban Air Force because he had that background, So he got this job, and he also had like a CIA handler in Cuba, who was a Swedish diplomat there. And he kind of got his instructions through these guys. So he was like a dormant CIA spy, also a trained assassin living in Cuba. And because he had a good job, he kind of was, promoted, and soon he was traveling to the USSR as a part of a Cuban delegation, and was getting closer to Castro, and on a few occasions was quite physically close to him, and maybe even met him and so on. And at that point, CIA, they decided to activate him, and through this Swedish diplomat supplied him with some lethal pills that he was supposed to use to kill Castro. But they also heard to this Swede that he's in an emotional relationship with a daughter of some Cuban official. So they ordered him to sever this relationship with her, which he refused to do. For the first time, he was like not obeying them, and they didn't like that. So they thought that he's kind of a rogue agent because he doesn't want to sever this relationship with this communist woman. So then CIA exposed him to the Cubans as their agent, again using this Swedish diplomat. So the Cubans arrested him. But Castro somehow took pity on him, didn't believe that he's actually a CIA agent. And instead of killing him, they exiled him through Peru. So he lived there for a while and then was like basically kidnapped by CIA, brought back to the US, and sentenced for the bombing he did on the airport. And this is why he's in prison.
Interesting.
Do you know if that's true at all, or if this is Kajević's...
I didn't research this guy. Maybe someone can tell us. I don't know if it's a real name or not, but I guess someone will know. Kajević also tells us he has some like Native American friends there, especially a guy called Wally, who he thinks was in prison because of like the Wounded Knee incident somehow. He's not sure, but he thinks Wally had something to do with it. He also says that Wally, hated white people, but was okay with him. And also says that, Wally was the first time offender and got 14 years and should have been out in 7, but because he was an American, native, they would keep him in prison for the entirety of his sentence, which was how the prison system treated not only native people but also black people. And he makes point of that, how they have no mercy for those people. Like even him as a terrorist, got out of prison after 8 years and he didn't serve the full 12.
Yeah.
But now there's this there's this subplot where I mentioned last time about this mysterious Rick Burda guy, because the FBI agent who's interviewing him, ex-FBI agent Thomas O'Neill, is very interested in this Burda guy. I mentioned he's this ex-Green Beret guy who's a son of a Lithuanian SS officer who was in prison with him and who was there because he became a bank robber, who also had kind of Nazi beliefs and hated black people and the Jews especially. And they were together, cleaning floors and so on, so they became friends. And Burda wanted Kajević to join his bank robbery operation after they got out of prison, which Kajević was not interested in. By the way, what's that Green Beret song? Because
the Ballad of the Green Berets.
Because
the song Burda, that we.
I don't know I don't know the lyrics, but
you don't remember them?
No.
You weren't moved to tears by the Ballad of the Green Berets? It's mostly hey, we jump out of planes and you're gonna die, and then your kid's gonna be a Green Beret, and then he'll die. That's my memory of the lyrics.
Because Burda, when he would rob a bank successfully, he would sing his favorite Green Beret song, which it's something 100 soldiers onward, something like this. I don't know.
Okay, so that's
100 men will test today, but only 3 win the Green Beret, perhaps? Might be a different song then.
Yes. So, the kind of the Thomas O'Neill ex-FBI agent is pressing Kajević to talk more about Burda. That's because in real time, when they're talking to him and Mary is vomiting and so on, this Burda is out and he's he has a plutonium smuggling operation, from they're getting plutonium from the USSR and something like that. So he's interested in knowing if Father Kajević has any contact or knows anything about him, which I'll get back to that shortly. But
I'm sorry, just imagine this guy. Okay, so that's his favorite Green Beret song. That means there are other Green Beret songs he knows that he likes less, So somebody could play a Green Beret song and he would be like, that one's not my favorite.
Exactly, yes. Well, he was a Green Beret. So,
Yeah, well, no surprise there.
Yeah. So we are now in going pretty quickly, and we are in the last year of Father Kajević's prison time, or maybe last in Leavenworth anyway. And that was also the bloodiest year. So lots of people get killed there, and he was in a cell with a drug dealer called Harry Norton. Norton had many privileges in the prison. He openly was dealing drugs, and the cell they were in was a center for the drug business there. And he freely used the telephones to, organize these drug businesses. There was no pressure, any kind of surveillance from, the guards or anything. But Harry didn't or trust Kajević. Kajević didn't use drugs. He also was a foreigner and terrorist and so on. And Harry kind of got very paranoid about him and was thinking that Kajević is somehow jinxing his business, that he's getting ill because he's living with him, that things are not going well and so on. So he decided to kill Father Kajević, and he wanted to use another prisoner who, a Bob, who was an addict who owned some money to Harry and who was supposed to kill Father Kajević. But this didn't work. And that's all what I'm going to say today about that. But I will say more about this on a premium episode.
Look at you. Look at you selling our Patreon to the people.
Yes. Because this is sensitive information that's only for our patrons. And I will reveal in this little story how Father Kajević didn't get killed. It has a Manson family connection.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. So we'll talk about that on Patreon. And it is sensitive in some sense. Although, okay, I don't want to oversell it. But it's interesting.
Yeah, we have a very special relationship with our 12 patrons, and
yes.
some things are just for their ears only.
True. So yeah, I mentioned that he was at some point. We're almost done now. He was visited by this bishop, the Orthodox bishop. And this was actually a bishop who was not from the Serbian Orthodox Church. It was Bishop Anthony from the Russian Orthodox Church for North America, which I guess today is the American Orthodox Church or the Orthodox Church of America.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he visited him, Bishop Anthony, there, and he kind of took pity on him and offered him a job as soon as he gets out to basically become a priest of that church, and he would get a parish in Cleveland. But that's the bishop also who was kind of shocked by the way he was treated by the prison system. Right. So he left quickly. But around that time, Kajević also received a letter from Kathleen, who didn't forget about him, and was clearly still in love with him, and so on. And also mentioned Ronald Reagan in the letter, how she saw him, and Reagan asked about Father Kajević and said we need to pray for him, and so on. So immediately, he has this dilemma because he has a job offered to be him a priest, but then Kathleen is there, what he should do. Although I'm not sure why is this in conflict.
Yeah, why is that a problem?
Yeah, because he's a priest, he can marry.
Orthodox,
he's an Orthodox priest, he can marry. Also, we don't know what happened to his wife at all. Like that's one.
He's already married.
Or I don't know if he's married because that woman is not like he mentioned so many women except his wife.
Right.
Like in the first book he mentioned that he had a wife, and that's about what we hear about her. So I don't know if she's even alive. What's going on? No idea. Clearly, when he's out of prison, he lives alone. He doesn't mention her, or maybe she's there, but just I don't know what she's doing.
I mean, can they get? Yeah. They can get married, but they can't get divorced. I guess, right?
They can get divorced.
Can they?
Yeah.
I mean,
wow, what a progressive church the Serbian Orthodox Church is.
Maybe she died. I don't know. Maybe he can remarry. I don't know what's going on. Like, yeah.
Clearly doesn't give a shit about her because he never mentions her.
Yeah.
Again.
No.
Yeah.
But while he was having the dilemmas, he was suddenly let out of prison because before he was let out of prison, he was moved from Leavenworth to like a better kind of medium security or something like this prison, and there was like a bureaucrat there, like I think a Mr. Parker or something like this, who kind of like was a good guy and liked him. And Mr. Parker like looked into his case and figured out that because of his well behavior, he was like given like 8 months. He was to be released 8 months earlier, which he only realized because he looked into his case. So it was basically he was told that tomorrow you're a free man, which was very like sudden for him. He didn't expect that. So he was let out of prison. And so okay, Father Kajević is now a free guy again. So he is like going to Illinois, to a place called Berwyn, Illinois. So first thing that he's doing, he's going to the bar where 8 years prior they were plotting how to bomb shit. So he's going there for a drink or two, or I don't know how many. And so, and after that, that's also the town where his brother Živko lives. We know Živko also a priest. We remember the adventures from, in how they traveled through France and how, Živko kind of kicked that French guy's ass. And,
yes. Lost them a ride.
Yes, lost them a ride and so on. So he goes to Živko's place and everything is good. He's visiting his buddies. He's visiting a kafana, like a bar called Miomir's Club. I think Miomir is the guy who was sleeping when they were trying to kill Tito in Des Moines.
The guy in the car?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, he's back with everyone. They're getting drunk and hammered and everything's fine. But there is this, this shadow of this Rick Burda guy, which is, this subplot of the book. Yeah. And, and Thomas O'Neill wants to know if he knows anything where this guy is and so on. But basically, Father Kajević did meet Burda after prison because Burda insisted on that. But when they met, he refused to become a part of his bank robbing or, I don't know, plutonium smuggling scheme or whatever.
Yeah. Good call there.
There was some. There is some similarity between them because Buddha is also into Nietzsche, and also kind of has, we discussed how Father Kajević has this Nietzschean view of terrorists, almost free of any ideology. They are just like special, superior men who are like fighting for social justice and so on, if they are real terrorists, not the sick ones. So Buddha is kind of into that ideas, but more Nazi than that. So Father Kajević refuses his proposal, but he also tells him like, listen, you should really follow my ideas because they're superior to your ideas. And so Buddha was like, whoa, what are your ideas? And then Kajević explains it's pretty dumb what his ideas is, but it's so basically his idea is like how it's very funny. I mean, so Kajević's idea is that criminals and like his brotherhood of prisoners and people who were there, they should stop doing crime because in that way the law enforcement agencies will collapse. They won't have what to do. So it's basically a boycott of crime that he's calling for, and this will collapse the oppressive system because they won't have,
Wow.
And also like for the final kind of finale of what he tells to Buddha is like, how all the criminals, even if they're the most stupid ones, think they're superior to the people who are like not criminals, and Buddha says like, yeah. And Father Kajević says, well, and then he kind of, because he said how they believe they're superior, but then he switches and says like, well, they should use their superiority for the good,
Nice.
They should embrace justice and truth and like, help society.
What is he, Bakunin?
I guess so, I don't know. So yeah,
I love the idea of just a general strike of criminals just refusing to do crime.
Yeah.
That's, man.
Yeah.
That's great.
I mean, that's an interesting analysis of how that system works. If he's already said that, like, they kind of create problems, the police, to like put people in prison.
I mean, especially because he himself said that basically it was a war on poor people.
Right,
so
exactly.
Right.
So, that like people were in prison because they were poor. Like he saw that quite clearly, but I guess, I don't know.
Yeah, I guess he forgot when he got out.
Yeah.
How long was he in for in total?
8 years.
8 years. All right. Man, what a story. What a guy.
Yeah.
It's interesting because, you hear a lot of prison narratives and, ones from this time period as well. But, never from Chetnik terrorist priests.
Yes.
And it is remarkable how much more aware he is than like most of, the American Nazis that we covered that go to prison around the same time. You know what I mean? Like they have radically different experiences.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to overstate this and make some kind of whatever out of him, but it is kind of striking because when we just discussed those people, it was like how fucking horrible they are in every way. And this guy is like more like how he's not like completely getting it, but like he's getting lots of it. Like I mean, it's not only that he's like not saying horrible things; he's saying things that kind of make sense.
Yeah,
and like it's not completely consistent in them. Has some stupid ideas.
Very stupid ideas. Man.
But yeah, definitely not the turn I expected.
No. And easily one of our more sympathetic characters on this show, if not the most. Well, as far as our gallery of rogues go, I mean, we have some good people here too. I mean, we've done some like labor organizers and stuff like that too. Obviously,
I don't count those people. Like,
but like as far as our normal cast goes, I'd say he's definitely. I mean, Boris, you seem unconvinced by that. Who would you put him under?
Oof, yeah, I mean, it is tough. It's tough to make that kind of ranking in general.
Well, okay, we had like some non-fascists who are also kind of crazy, like Mustafa Golubić, for example.
Yeah.
No.
But I mean, Father Kajević doesn't have like a real redemption arc because he just realizes how bullshit like the American system is, but he's still. I think he can do that kind of detachment because he's like, well, I'm fighting to liberate my homeland, so like it doesn't matter if I can critique.
Yeah, he's not committed to America or Americanism. He's not an Americanist.
Right. Yeah, but also, Yugoslavia stopped being a communist country. Let's say, if it ever was, it wasn't. But let's use that term. And he's still kind of not clear about because he even says at some point discussing about the new system that exists in the post-Yugoslav countries, and says some people say that the one before, like the communist one, was better than this one. And it's open to a debate which one is better, or something like this,
Oh, like, now it's open to a debate. Thanks.
Like, well, you kind of dedicated your life to destroying that one, and now it's open for a debate, which is like, okay, but he clearly doesn't believe in anything that he believed before.
Yeah.
But he's kind of confused about things. Like, this is why he talks in this very kind of non-political, kind of general sense of, discussing ethics and, things like this. And, like, it kind of, in a very nihilist way, when he discusses like terrorists as like people who are dedicated to social justice, but describes them but in a kind of psychological way, not in an ideological way. They are rebels. They are like people who dare to fight. They are not sheep like most people, and so on. So, but it's it's very non-ideological. It's like it's strange, and in that sense, it's kind of nihilist. He's like. What was that, the life that you had, like, because he basically describes it as a kind of psychological way to have some kind of meaning in life through struggle, to dedicate yourself to struggle to something, for something greater, and not live just an ordinary consumerist life. But then, it's almost like not important what are you struggling for, because he doesn't believe in what he struggled for. But he still thinks that the struggle gave some meaning to his life. So it's, I don't know. It's very nihilistic.
So he does kind of just become a guy who doesn't, like, without serious political conviction.
I think that when he gives interviews to, like, Serbian outlets and so on, he tries to sound more like he's still into those things. Like, he's like a Orthodox Serbian patriot who whatever believes what they believe. But when you read his books, you see that he's really kind of not so much into it. I mean, or at least it's not a primary thing that he's into. Like,
okay. Well, I guess on the sympathy issue, I think the lesson there is more that the American prison system is so horrifying that it makes people like Father Kajević sympathetic figures.
Yeah. I mean, James Mason was in prison. Didn't make him sympathetic.
I'm not. Yeah, that's fine. I have no feelings about that at all.
David Lane or something.
Yeah. Well, damn.
Yeah.
All right. So, and we're saving the big Manson reveal for a later Patreon episode. It sounds like. Huh?
Maybe I don't know if there will be time in the next one. If not next one,
hell, let's go for it. That one's getting packed with fun stuff. I mean, we got like a Satanic Front update. We maybe got some James Mason updates. Why not?
I think maybe James Mason stuff is maybe even an episode, no?
Oh, you think so?
We couldn't do that. My advice is, let's start the next Patreon episode with the satanic stuff that you want to talk about.
Okay.
So that we for sure will do it. Because last
for the
time
Morlockian Orthodox Halloween.
Yes. Because last time we skipped over and then you didn't have the time to say that. So let's start with that in the next one. Okay. And then if it's not for one episode, we'll make a James Mason updates separate Patreon.
All right. Yeah. I love it. And listeners, the only way to know how that played out is to sign up to our Patreon.
Yes.
That's it.
I mean, who wouldn't? Like you have...
Who wouldn't?
Satanic Nazis, Dark Lords, James Mason updates, the connection between Father Kajević and the Manson family.
Hey, yeah. For the low price of $5 a month.
Yeah.
Come on.
Tell your friends and neighbors about it.
Where do you can't afford not to.
Christ.
Good. Hard sell. I love it. All right. Let's get out of here.
All
so
right.
they can click that subscribe button. All right. Later, boys.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
Fritz here from The Empire Never Ended. This has been one of our weekly free episodes for free people. But for premium people, we also have weekly premium episodes, which you can get at patreon.com/tenepod, TENEPOD, and also follow our various social media things in the show description there. Like and subscribe them. Follow them. Like and follow and subscribe. Follow them. Do it.